Hello everyone, my name is Tom van der Meer and I'm a PhD candidate at Wageningen Environmental Research in collaboration with the University of Amsterdam. And today I'd like to talk to you about how interactions between two humble detrital feeders, the Tubifex worms and Asellus isopods, can affect the decomposition of organic matter in aquatic systems impacted by wastewater treatment plant effluents. As wastewater treatment plant effluent is discharged, excess nutrients and fine organic sludge particles enter the aquatic environment. And this often results in eutrophicated systems with a high microbial activity, low oxygen concentrations, and a benthos clogged with fine particles. And this often results in the loss of sensitive taxa, such as the EPT taxa, while other less sensitive taxa, such as chironomids, Tubifex, and Asellus, remain. And these remaining taxa still perform ecosystem functions, such as organic matter degradation. And the detrivorous invertebrates play an important role in the decomposition of organic matter, and they can stimulate this decomposition, and thereby also playing a role in the nutrient dynamics of aquatic ecosystems. And in such impacted systems with increased organic matter input, they can possibly also mitigate some of the negative effects of this increased input. And as I just mentioned, taxa often occurring are the Asellus, such as Asellus aquaticus, and Tubifex, such as Tubifex. And a quick picture of how they do it: they feed on organic material, release nutrients from this material, and aquatic macrophytes can grow. But these two species have a different mode of locomotion and a different mode of feeding, while they both feed on the same organic matter. So we wondered, are there any interactions during this feeding? Because if they feed on the same food source, competitive interactions may occur, and one or both of the species might be hampered or negatively affected in their performance. On the other hand, if the feeding of one species or taxa results in a modification of the original organic matter, this modified organic matter might be more suitable for the other species, and this can actually result in an increased performance of the other species, and thus in a so-called feeding chain. So do these two taxa, the Asellus and the Tubifex, do they facilitate or hamper each other during the degradation of organic matter? And also very important, how is the rate of organic matter decomposition affected by these interactions? And to address these questions, we use sludge from a wastewater treatment plant aeration tank as a source of organic matter to simulate a highly effluent impacted system. And we added about 1 gram of dry weight sludge to each experimental container and about 80 milligrams of invertebrate biomass, which are either Tubifex, Asellus, or a combination of both. We sampled the overlying water for nutrients, and we determined the sludge weight, dry weight at the start of the experiment, and also after 28 days of treatment. For the invertebrates, we determined the survival and growth either as the number of Asellus or the weight of the Tubifex. And for the reproduction, we looked at the number of juvenile Asellus or the number of Tubifex cocoons produced. And this is what it looked like in real life. You see at the left a starting container with the sludge settled at the bottom and the overlying water. And this is how it looked after 28 days. Here you see a control with significantly less sludge, as you can see. But this is from the combination treatment with Asellus and Tubifex. And already you can see there's less sludge than in the control after 28 days. And also the composition of the sludge looks different, and if you look close you can even see some Asellus in the bottom picture. So visually already quite some differences after 28 days. But first I'll tell you something about the survival and reproduction of the organisms in our experiment. And unfortunately adult survival of Asellus was low in both treatments, but this could be explained by the fact that of their simulparous nature, which means that they often show a high mortality after reproduction. And luckily, reproduce they did, as you can see in the picture on the right. And moreover, we saw that there were about 4 times as much juveniles in the combination treatment and then in the Asellus-only treatment, which means the Asellus likely benefited from the interaction with the Tubifex. However, on the other hand, Tubifex were hampered in the reproduction, as you can see in the graph on the left, which shows that there's much fewer cocoons per milligram of Tubifex dry weight in the combination treatment than in the Tubifex-only treatment. On the left, you see a picture of a cocoon with the eggs inside it to give you an idea about how these cocoons look like. And on the right, we have the growth of the Tubifex, which, as you can see, is hampered in a combination treatment. It's even lower than the starting weight, while the Tubifex in the Tubifex-only treatment showed the growth. The interaction between the organisms did result in an increased sludge reduction, however, as you can see in the graph on the left. Here we plotted the remaining sludge relative to the control on the y-axis and the different treatments on the x-axis. And the most right treatment is the predicted effect of the combination treatment, which is predicted based on the results of the 2 single species treatments. And as you can see, the Tubifex do not have a significant effect on sludge reduction, while the Asellus actually also increase sludge reduction on their own. However, the combination of the 2 species actually further increases this reduction. And this increased degradation of organic material in the combination treatment also resulted in an increased phosphate flux in this treatment. However, nitrate fluxes and concentrations in the overlying water were high if Asellus were present, regardless of the presence of Tubifex. So in our experiment, we did not find any facilitation, as facilitation requires that both species are not negatively impacted by the interaction, and the Tubifex were clearly hampered in their growth and reproduction in the combination treatment. And we have a few hypotheses for these results, but we'd like to hear from you if you have any alternative hypotheses for our findings. But what we think might have happened is that the Asellus actually physically hampered the Tubifex, so they are quite large and can move quite fast. And as a reaction to this stimulus, the Tubifex might retract into their burrows, reducing the amount of time they can spend feeding. The second option is that the Asellus predate on Tubifex cocoons. Asellus are quite unfussy eaters and are known to also feed on the detrital material of animal origin. And the third option is that the Asellus actually outcompeted the Tubifex for the more nutritious sludge, which also could hamper the growth of the Tubifex. However, although there was no facilitation, the interaction between these 2 taxa still resulted in increased sludge reduction. And this might actually be caused by the outcompetition of the Tubifex by the Asellus, as the Tubifex were forced to feed on maybe a less nutritious part of the sludge, which resulted in a trophic niche shift. And although this would be negative for the Tubifex, a larger part of the sludge might in this case be degraded by the invertebrates, which could result in an increased total decomposition of the sludge. To conclude, macroinvertebrate interactions stimulate decomposition in wastewater treatment plant effluent impacted ecosystems, but those interactions do not have to be beneficial for each party involved. Furthermore, interactions do not only play a role in pristine ecosystems, but can also affect ecosystem functions in human impact systems, and might even be able to mitigate some of the negative effects of effluents. Moreover, these interactive effects have also an implication for the loss of or gain of invertebrate territidivores in a system. As with the loss or gain of such a species, there's also a loss or gain of all the interactions this species has with other species in the system. And the effect on organic matter decomposition might be greater than you could expect based on single species assessments. Therefore, when considering ecosystem functions, one should take always into account the possible interactive effects between aquatic detritivores species. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to see you during the discussion session.